Piscataqua. Historians have puzzled over the origins of the name since its discovery by white explorers. Piscataqua is believed to be an Abenaki word meaning rapid waters. Some scholars believe it is the combination of pesca, meaning branch, and tigua, a river with a strong current. Bottom line, no one is really sure what Piscataqua means. The word Cocheco is also Abenaki. Scholars seem to agree it means the rapid foaming water, referring to the falls in downtown Dover. The river merges with the salmon at the main border, and there becomes the Piscataqua. Prior to the English settlers coming to this area, the Piscataqua was used by the Abenakis for fishing, hunting, and farming. The Portsmouth and Dover region was the beginning area for exchanges between the Native Americans and the English settlers. At various times, trading posts existed at what is now Odiorns Point, Portsmouth, Dover Point, and at the mouth of the Salmon Falls River. English settlers farmed, fished, and logged the country around Hilton Point and the falls of the Cocheco River in what is now Dover, the oldest continuously occupied town in New Hampshire. Martin Pring was on the Piscataqua River as early as 1603 looking for sassafras. In 1614, Captain John Smith named this area New England. The first settlement near Portsmouth occurred in 1623 at what is now Odiorns Point. In 1631, the first house was built in what would become Portsmouth on the southeast corner of Court Street, where it crosses Marcy. Also, the river was the site of the first sawmill in the colonies in 1623. Because of the profusion of wild strawberries found in this region in early summer, it became known as Strawberry Bank. It was changed to Portsmouth in 1653. Reverend William Hubbard, who wrote a general history of New England in 1690, called our Piscataqua a river of note. Before the 17th century ends, do you know what the people did for their livelihood? Here was a tiny community clinging for life to the banks of a river. Of course, they would turn to the stream at their feet. For those who had no bent for the sea, there were the forests. From the forest came the timber products, clapboards, shingles, planking, and masts. From the Atlantic came edible fish. Trade began in earnest. Building vessels that would carry all of these items became another major occupation. Around 1720, as shipbuilding increased, so did the desire for beautiful homes in the Portsmouth area. The timber would come down the river to Dover and then go to Portsmouth. The 18th century was also showing growing pains with the French and Indian Wars, and then the Revolutionary War. The Treaty of Paris is signed in 1783. The one place where all the problems were discussed was at the local taverns. By the middle of the 18th century, several taverns were prospering, and they were not just for strangers. During the Revolutionary War, there were troops in the Piscataqua forts. Where the naval prison stands is the remains of Fort Sullivan, named for Brigadier General John Sullivan of Durham. The construction of the frigate Raleigh was done in Portsmouth. With this construction, Portsmouth proved they could build warships. The Ranger was the next ship to be built, and it was captained by John Paul Jones. In 1767, Portsmouth, at the center of the Piscataqua region, had a population of 4,500 people. By 1790, the Piscataqua shipping and fishing industries had made Portsmouth the 14th largest city in the country. During the 17th and 18th century, Portsmouth became a prominent seaport, boasting some of the most substantial wharves and warehouses in New England. The longest of the Portsmouth Pier Company's wharves was located just south of the present-day Memorial Bridge ramp and had a 3-story warehouse sectioned into 14 stores and contained trade goods from the West Indies, South America, Europe, and Russia. Sheaf's Warehouse is the sole survivor of a type of building once found throughout the Piscataqua River Basin. Several brick structures were built on the east side of Marcy Street in the early 1800s. Because of fear of fire, it discouraged wooden construction. The only brick building still remaining is the Players' Ring Theater. This building went from servicing commerce to industry to the arts. The Great Bay made it difficult to bring goods down to Portsmouth. Freight had to be brought to various points, then loaded onto gondolas for shipment down the river, a time-consuming operation, when a bridge would mean a faster and more direct wagon trip to the dockside of Portsmouth. In the House Journal of December 19, 1792, a bridge is mentioned. When a committee was set up to consider a petition, the bridge was completed in 1794, and it was called the Piscataqua Bridge. The Portsmouth Bridge, which connected Maine to New Hampshire, was built in 1822, and it was called Wiggly Old Pile Bridge. Today, we have three majestic bridges in Portsmouth. The first was the Memorial Bridge, opened to traffic in 1923, which is a lift bridge. Second is the Piscataqua River Bridge, a through-arch bridge which connects Portsmouth, New Hampshire to Kittery, Maine. The high arch design of this bridge eliminates the need for a movable roadway. The Sarah Mildred Long Bridge is also a lift bridge. The original Sarah Mildred Long Bridge was opened in the 1940s, and the new one opened on March 30th, 2018. Many ships or clippers were built along the Piscataqua River. George Raines built the Webster in 1853. Samuel Hanscom built at a yard in Elliott, Maine, along the Piscataqua. He built one of the most famous of the Piscataqua clippers, called the Nightingale. When the Civil War demonstrated that steam-driven vessels were here to stay, Portsmouth faded as a ship construction port, with only the naval shipyard, until World War I. In 1849, Portsmouth was incorporated as a city, one of the nation's busiest ports and shipbuilding cities. It expressed its wealth in fine architecture. Two devastating fires in the early 1800s burned down over 200 buildings in Portsmouth. A fire district was created that required all new buildings within its boundaries to be built with brick and slate roofs. In the 20th century, the city founded a historic district committee which worked to protect much of the city's irreplaceable architectural legacy. Portsmouth's shipbuilding history has a long symbiotic relationship with Kittery, Maine across the river. Located at the head of navigation, Cocheco Falls brought the Industrial Revolution to Dover. The Dover Cotton Factory was incorporated in 1812, then enlarged in 1823 to become the Dover Manufacturing Company. In 1827, the Cocheco Manufacturing Company was founded. In 1829, it purchased the Dover Manufacturing Company. Expansive brick mills linked by railroad were constructed in downtown Dover. Most of the bricks used to build the mills were produced at local brickyards along the Bellamy River. The rivers were starting to get polluted from waste dye and manure from the dung bath that set the colors. The company's greatest production and expansion occurred between 1860 and 1895. In the late 1800s, the power of the Cocheco River was used by the waterfront mills to make textiles. From these mills flowed a river of cloth which was sold throughout the region and around the world. The mills generated enormous economic power as well, creating hundreds of jobs which helped Dover's growth. The mills thrived until the turn of the century, when southern cotton mills began providing stiff competition. Two disastrous fires at one complex, followed by the Great Depression of 1929, sealed the mill's fate. A succession of businesses used the mills over the years, but by the 1980s most of the buildings had declined. Dover had also been known for shoemaking. In Portsmouth, the waterfront section also declined, and that area became an impoverished district. Today, Portsmouth remains a working port. A towering ship sitting next to swaying cranes and swing buckets, unloading tons of salt, exists in close proximity to the shops and cafes in downtown Portsmouth. This is a clean, working waterfront. About 5 million tons of cargo crosses Piscataqua piers annually to the petroleum and dry bulk terminals 3 miles upriver in Newington. Salt ships, gypsum carriers, passenger vessels, commercial fishing boats, and submarines typically arrive at Portsmouth, Newington, and Kittery piers. Most of the coal and petroleum products, gas, kerosene, diesel, and asphalt, as well as propane, cement, and more salt, are discharged at the terminal lining the Newington shore. The vitality of the working port is important to all of us, but there are some environmental impacts and a risk of an environmental disaster. In 1996, a tanker broke loose from the Schiller Station power plant in Newington while offloading oil. The ship grounded at high tide across the Piscataqua on the Elliott shore, and she was almost on the submarine ledge. The harbor pilots, tug crews, and Coast Guard got her off while the tide was still high, and the spill was limited to several thousand gallons. It demonstrated the need for better spill response planning. The Oil Pollution Act of 1990 requires all U.S. ports handling oil to have equipment and a plan to help stop the spills. Recognition of the essential relationship between the quality of the natural environment and quality of life generally will ensure the continued health of the Piscataqua's estuaries, rivers, and coastline, even as the historic port retains a working waterfront. Have you ever seen this river before? It's the Piscataqua River. How about this river? It's the Cocheco. Rivers flowing from 52 communities in New Hampshire and Maine join with the waters of the Atlantic Ocean to form the Great Bay and Hampton-Seabrook estuaries. An estuary is a partially enclosed coastal body of brackish water, with one or more river or streams flowing into it, and with a free connection to the open sea. Estuaries form a transition zone between river environments and maritime environments. They are subject to both marine influences such as tides, waves, and the influx of saline oil saltwater, and to river influences such as flows of fresh water and sediment. What is a watershed? Watersheds are areas of land that drain to a particular water body such as a lake, stream, river, or estuary. And what is the difference between a watershed and an estuary? Watersheds allow the water to drain away. A watershed can be a huge area covering millions of square miles. A watershed refers to a divide that separates one drainage area from another drainage area. An estuary is a water channel. Our estuaries are valuable ecosystems that provide a multitude of services we all rely on. They help us protect from flooding and storm surges during storms, clean and filter pollutants from the water. Salt marshes absorb and store more excess human-produced carbon than any other ecosystem on Earth. Every 5 years, the Piscataqua Region Estuaries Partnership gives a report detailing the health of the Great Bay and Hampton-Seabrook estuaries. We know today that again our estuaries have declined and are becoming less resilient in the face of growing pressures. Our clam and oyster populations have dropped by 90%, and half our eelgrass has disappeared. Invasive plant and animal species, diseases, and nuisance algae are on the rise as water temperatures continue to go up. This will lead to an uncertain future for our rivers and estuaries. Who lives in the watersheds? Everyone lives in a watershed. No matter where we live, we will always be part of a watershed. For this reason, residents of New Hampshire can affect a lake in Massachusetts, Maine, or Vermont, and vice versa. Pollution anywhere within the watershed has the potential to affect all bodies of water located downstream. Watersheds are extremely important. They can provide us with our drinking water, plus recreational opportunities like boating, swimming, and fishing, and also provide us with natural beauty. Never dump chemicals down storm drains because they lead directly to rivers and bodies of water. Unfortunately, the replacement of vegetation by things like roads, parking lots, and rooftops has a negative effect on watersheds. This increases the speed and amount of runoff flowing into surface waters, and that causes erosion, turbidity, and degraded wildlife habitats. This runoff carries pollutants, such as oil, bacteria, nutrients, sediments, and metals, into the surface water. Forested areas play an important role in the health of a watershed. It allows water to be filtered and released slowly into the stream system. The Cocheco, Salmon, Bellamy, and Piscataqua all play a vital role in our ecology and way of life. We have a responsibility to keep them healthy.